There is not a great deal of familiarity amongst most Americans with Xi Jinping at the moment. They have been exposed to discussions about China largely through the lens of the most recent presidential campaign, Andrew. And as you know, as you and I have discussed, that has been largely negative. China is still associated in the United States with jobs, lower wage manufacturing jobs, the loss of jobs, particularly in the industrial Midwest, the Rust Belt, states like Ohio. But it is interesting because, as you know, I was just recently traveling through the Midwest on the CNN Express, that bus. And in places like Ohio, not only are people concerned about manufacturing and China's wage rates and human rights practices, but at the same time, China has become a bit of an investor in some of those areas. At the waterfront in Toledo, China is an investor. So Americans have a complex relationship with China. They understand that they need China. They need what Stan was talking about, the growth of a consumer sector. And that's starting to happen, Andrew. We've seen some numbers in the last month, in fact, that indicate that that slowing GDP growth down all the way to 7.4% in the third quarter is actually possibly starting to turn around. There are a number of economic indicators in China that show some strength. So Americans are watching it very carefully. Like I said, I don't think a great deal of familiarity, but an understanding that China is important and that the type of language that we hear during an election campaign, a presidential campaign, is probably not entirely reflective of the economic relationship that America has and needs to have with China. Andrew.
Yeah, as you talk about sort of the growth of China and people's awareness, Ali, just looking at the numbers, I mean, under Hu Jintao, the current about to step down president, China's economy has quadrupled, $7.3 trillion, that economy now. It's the second biggest, as we keep on talking about. Let's just talk about the relationship, as you see it so far, between Barack Obama and China, because it's a key word, complex. The whole relationship between these two world's biggest economies is complex. How would you describe the relationship between, or the relations that Barack Obama, the re-elected president, has built up with China?
Well, they're quite good. As you know, Barack Obama hosted a state visit by Hu Jintao to Washington. During the campaign, both Obama and Romney were almost outdoing each other to see who could be tougher on China. It's very clear the Chinese administration understood that. Things probably went a little further than they needed to in terms of the rhetoric, largely because Mitt Romney said if he were elected on day one, he would have declared China a currency manipulator. Barack Obama pointed out during the campaign that the UN has appreciated some 10 or 11% during his time in office. And mostly Barack Obama has spent his time focusing on the fairness of trade relations with China, the currency issue, the issue of intellectual property protection in China, and, of course, the human rights working conditions and fair wages issue. But ultimately, Barack Obama has shown a great deal of understanding of the nuance in the relationship with China. I think China recognizes that. This is a codependent, interdependent relationship. China needs the U.S. to remain strong, to remain a purchasing power. The example, Andrew, of what has happened in Europe and the weakening of purchasing in Europe and what it's done to Chinese factories, it makes it all the more clear that China needs America to be strong and to remain a strong customer. Barack Obama has shown no indication that things will be anything different. He just liked the relationship to be a little fairer, and he's getting a lot of pressure from American companies to ensure that China does a little more on the intellectual property protection side of things.